Welcome everybody to This Week in X. We are here to discuss the first issue of S.W.O.R.D. out on the 9th of December 2020. This is a big one. It is an extra-sized issue. It has a massive cast. There's so much to talk about. And in order to talk about it, we are going to spoil a lot of stuff. Not only the stuff that's in the issue itself, but we're going to probably spoil a lot of recent books, including Empire, because there are some references from Al Ewing's Empire in this issue, as well as, you know, the whole history of the Marvel Universe as one does. So I'm joined here by Tyler and Harry to dig very, very deeply into this issue. And here we go. I think there's a few huge chunks that we have to cover here. There's the chunk of just S.W.O.R.D. What is S.W.O.R.D.? What is S.W.O.R.D. to Krakoa now? There's that chunk. Then there's just all the characters. And then there's also kind of like Magneto's walk around and how this leads us organically as a storytelling mechanism into seeing this group of characters do their thing for the first time, whatever that thing may or may not be. So let me put out this caveat. We cannot possibly cover every single thing, nor is that our mission statement. There are a lot of fine outlets who are covering every single thing, and our brethren in the Xavier protocols, Zach Rabaroff, actually is covering this on XavierFiles.com, and he wrote an amazing, amazing write-up of it, co-authored with Noel Fa, another fantastic writer. So if you really are looking for like deep, deep dives into symbolism, which you know Zach can provide if you watch this Hickman report, let me give my highest possible plug to heading over to Xavier Files when you're done and reading that. And with that out of the way, I think we're going to do our part in taking this apart a little bit. So let's talk S.W.O.R.D. before we get into the personnel. Harry, you most recently read the S.W.O.R.D. miniseries, the original S.W.O.R.D. miniseries, and of course, which branches in its own way out of Whedon's Astonishing X-Men, kind of, because that's where we got Brand.
No, for sure.
If you had to summarize to us before reading this issue, what was S.W.O.R.D.? What was S.W.O.R.D.?
S.W.O.R.D. to me, and I've read Whedon's run, a bit of Ellis's, and Gillen's S.W.O.R.D. mini. And, you know, it definitely is kind of like the space equivalent of S.H.I.E.L.D. that's fighting against, you know, interplanetary, you know, space conflict and alien races and what have you. But what's interesting, kind of the through line through that character and that whole idea is that, you know, S.W.O.R.D. has always kind of been not second rate, but always kind of looked down on by other kind of characters in the world. And even Brand herself feels like a character who's always a little frustrated because she's never gotten her due. That's a big part of the S.W.O.R.D. mini where she's been kind of being jerked around by a higher up or another member of the bureaucracy in that book. So that was just an interesting thread that I was seeing when reading Gillen's stuff. But it is a government force designed to fight off aliens and threats and all that kind of classic, you know, Marvel government stuff. And that was,
I mean, and that was kind of like, it was mentioned here. I mean, Brand is basically did mention something of that nature here, and her appearance at the end of Empire also reflects that particular dissatisfaction. You know, with her supposedly being in charge of S.W.O.R.D. and basically is supposed to be the gateway, you know, between Earth and the alien races, and yet she is constantly being bypassed by, you know, the Avengers, by governments of the world doing their own thing. So
I mean,
I always find it to be like a really charming modern take on what S.H.I.E.L.D. probably would be like. You know, the classic version of S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of like, they're just happy to be invited. They're always there doing something. They've always got an LMD. But this is, I really like when fiction, comics, novels deal with the idea of bureaucracy and find like an entertaining thing in bureaucracy, because as the modern world evolves, we're all stuck in some bureaucracy, whether that's the bureaucracy of our job or of our, you know, insurance or of the place, you know, that we're renting or buying to live in. And I really enjoy that the story of S.W.O.R.D., as Brand recounts it to us here, is this story of bureaucracy. There's always somebody in her way. There's always somebody making a deal with an alien race without her approval. And, you know, this is her basically being like, well, you know what? Humanity won't give me enough of a carte blanche to do the things I need to do. So guess what? I'm a mutant, so I'm going to side with mutants this time, and we'll see how that goes. And I love that she's not like, I pledge allegiance to Xavier here. She's like, this is yet another means to trying to do the space stuff that I know needs to be done, which to me, I love Brand. She is one of my favorite characters at Marvel for this reason, because she feels like she's always got the right idea and she's getting thwarted by some bureaucratic nonsense that's outside of her control. Yeah. And even her whole data page about like, oh, Alpha Flight, well, that was a wreck. It's like, you were in charge of that. And she's like, yeah, but it still was messed up. And of course they're going to go to Captain Marvel. And I'm like, she was your managing director. Yeah, but that sucked. And it's just like, there's something really charming to me about it because it represents the real world.
She feels like a character that's never fully gotten her due, and that kind of is obviously a reflection of the book. Also, we don't have a lot of S.W.O.R.D books, and that Gillen book was great, and it got cut. It got cut after 5 issues. It's like it's never really had its shot.
Stealth-minied.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's true. I mean, but the data page is also playing the trope that has always been on science fiction show, like especially on Star Trek. Like they have the captain's log thing that opens, in most episode. And, my personal favorite, like science fiction series on TV is Babylon 5. And they do quite a bit of that too. So
Babylon 5 is a good one, y'all. Don't sleep on it. This was before JMS was a terrible Spider-Man writer.
Well, editorial interference.
Yeah.
Well,
but I mean, that's the thing, right? It is a way for writers to sneak in exposition without it being exposition-y on TV. And in this case, I think it works too. And it makes Brand a little bit more sarcastic and funny, because she's writing, she was talking about certain things that happened before the events of this book, of this issue.
And back to Peter's point about bureaucracy, in that data page, she mentions that because this is something that's going on in the Immortal Hulk book right now. Like Henry Gyrich is back in charge of some stuff, and she's like, he's back, he's in charge again. Like we can't.
The weasel emerges from his burrow once
exactly.
again.
Like of course you're fed up with this whole situation. Like leave. Like go to hang out with the mutants. They have a much better time right now, and that's kind of like. That's like a meta commentary almost. I feel.
True.
Gyrich ruins everything. He's every. That's
he's
his
the worst.
sole purpose as a character is ruining.
He has been
ruined the Avengers. He's ruined X Factor. He's ruined everything.
He shows up in the S.W.O.R.D mini and he's just like, all right, we need to get rid of all the aliens. And it's just like, God, you're such a drag. Like, can you leave? Please.
All right. So now I think we're going to try to do 2 things in one here, which is we're going to tackle the immense cast, but also tackle Magneto's interactions with some of them as he walks through. But let's tackle Magneto himself first. No stranger to living in Earth's orbit. He comes up to the station in his metallic ball and just docks like, I mean, it strikes me that Ewing has maybe been waiting to get his hands on Magneto to write him for a while, and he's not going to he's not going to give up his shot here.
He needs to be writing Magneto for a very long time. This has been the most fun I've had reading this character in years. It's just such like a mix of arrogance and weirdly kind of vulnerability, but also down to earth. It's a really, really good version of the character.
Talk about the vulnerable point for a second, because I think that's what's so interesting about the Magneto in this issue.
Well, he comes off, like Magneto, the master of magnetism, this great figure, but also he's this person who clearly is representing Krakoa, but isn't really the person in charge in this environment. And it's not the usual thing you see from him. And then later in the issue, they're speaking about his daughter, Wanda, kind of being the pretender and what have you. Yeah. And there's such a moment of weird, quiet, just emotion on his face. And it's almost tender, but also kind of upset. And it's just, there's shades to this that I haven't seen in this character. I really ever, I can't think. I don't know about y'all have read 8 times as much as I have. So I don't know if you have, but.
I mean, there are quite a few good Magneto scenes throughout the years. I mean, you can go all the way back to his anguish when he thought he accidentally killed Kate or Kitty at a time.
One of my favorite issues of all time.
Yeah. And then there is this issue where he was filming in Asteroid M because he just learned that Moira messed with his genetics when he was a baby. So that is another good like Magneto scene for me, I think. And and I don't know. I mean, I find that there's another scene where he basically knelt and pledged allegiance to Scott, to Cyclops. I thought that was another powerful scene as well.
Is it in Fractions run or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, right.
And then his own series, which spun off Burns run, is like chock full of like good Magneto scenes, throughout that short run.
And if Tyler's list kind of tells us anything here, and to Harry's point, that he's such a powerful character that when an author gives him a true weakness, a weakness of emotion or in spirit, not a weakness to be exploited, but somewhere where he actually feels vulnerable, it just plays really well. Like every single thing on that list was one of those moments, and they are as well. Tyler's my top Magneto moments of all time as well. And so and Ewing does that without ever getting to it's never like he almost kills Kitty Pryde or he bends the knee to Cyclops. Like we don't ever get a moment that big except for the Wanda moment, which still is quick. And yet that sense kind of pervades this issue. I deliberately try to stay away from other people's commentary before we record. It's part of why we record so quickly. But I did happen to run into Zach, who runs Xavier Files, different Zach with a K. And he was saying that like part of what's so interesting about this, Zach, I'm stealing your point for my show, sorry, is that Magneto recognizes that he does not have primacy here. Like this is not, Brand is doing something that's the next step. Magneto's on Earth. He's like the step behind, and he's not in charge of this whole space thing. And this is almost kind of like a generational handoff to, the next person who's going to push it forward. And he can't help but be a little bit reflective in that environment. And I don't know that I got that in my read, but I think it's a fascinating take on the issue.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't, he's never like vocalizing it, but he definitely seems in like a smaller position. And I kind of found this issue to be an interesting kind of mirror of the first issue of House of X, where, he's now the ambassador being shown around the much different, much developed.
He's the god.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like you're showing without actually saying it out loud that this is an evolution and almost a breakaway from this world we just established without actively saying it, and that's so well done.
Oh, so perfectly put, Harry.
I mean, in some way, he also keeps reminding Brand that he is the person, like he is Magneto, right? I mean, he subtly moved the entire station just because Cable calls him an old man, and so he did it like twice. He moved it once because Cable called him an old man, and he's like, well, this old man can do something. And then the second time he did it, he basically geostationary the station above Krakoa. And I don't think that was what Brand really wanted him to do or asked him to do. He just did it. And almost
as like a you need us and we need you.
It's a flex. He's flexing on him.
Yeah. So it's like, yes, in some ways he's like, I'm leaving this part of the plan to you, but don't forget, I'm still Magneto, and I know everyone here.
That's true. He knows people at this place. He's popular.
He calls them by the name.
Well,
let's
get into that.
I love that.
Magneto showing great management tactics, calling everybody by their first name as well as their mutant names here.
Except for that one.
Well,
he gets
delicious. So, okay, let's go through somewhat lightning rounding here. There's 6 sections of S.W.O.R.D. The first section is technology and engineering. WizKid is the station technologist. WizKid, of course, famously introduced in Exterminators #1, part of the lead up to Inferno in 1988. You would be forgiven if you've forgotten that, because he has not appeared in too many other places since then. And this is as deep as a deep cut gets. I mean, this is a character with a handful of appearances.
No, definitely. And I spoke to Peter offline before we did this recording. I was like, is it me, or is he supposed to be written as like gender fluid here?
Yeah, I wondered that also. He's definitely got a certain appearance that made you kind of wonder. And kind of off topic, but he has, I think, the best design of any character in this book. WizKid looks
awesome.
He looks incredible. Like it's an interesting character. It's an interesting appearance. Like it's just such like a strong like first showing. And it's nice for me to talk with you guys when you have characters you don't know as well for once. But yeah.
Yeah, the combination of the chair, which is kind of like a spin on Xavier's classic gold chair, which is on display behind me for those of you watching the video. But then the popped collar and the jacket giving him some coolness from one angle, but then it's kind of just like the bright red and nods back to what they always wore previously. And then the kind of like, is there a little bit of a gender bent aspect to their appearance? We don't know. Hopefully we'll get a chance to dig in. But also let's talk about WizKid is just taken aback that they get to talk directly to Magneto himself.
Yeah.
Which I think was like a great genuine moment here.
I love that's been a running thing in the Hoxpox era, which is that Magneto is kind of like almost like a folk hero to all of the mutants who are just like enamored with him. Right. I think you see that play out later with 2 interactions.
Well, and also that we get his power, Ewing tweaking his power, being like, and he does it in a series of lines, like, you're a technopath. And he's like, yeah, but any technology, plant-based, mutant-based, we're mutants, so we're technology. I'm like, all right, Ewing, just whip it out.
Just do it. Why not?
Like, it's like Hickman making Sinister a mutant. Let's just get it done and just move on.
Yeah, I read that.
It's not even, I mean, it feels, because he's so obscure, it's not even as if this is a retcon. It's like
nobody's gonna get upset.
No, there's
just
nothing
a clarification, of his powers.
Yeah, when I read that line, I was just like, oh, they're gonna do some wild stuff with this character through this book. Like, I think he's quietly the MVP for me. It's kind of not even sure why. I just think he looks incredible, and he's got like a lot of potential.
I just wanted to spend more time with WizKid, like, which in sentences that we never thought we would say before this book. All right, so let's move on to logistics, which is kind of a misleading name because it's really the telepath or the teleport core. So logistics is led by Manifold, the Quintitian. Manifold, of course, is a Jonathan Hickman creation because he is from Secret Warriors then used in his Avengers run. And he's got a whole team of wonderfully obscure teleporters. This is where I started to get really like fan crazy. Blink, of course, originally introduced in the Age of Apocalypse. Lila Cheney, of course, introduced early in the New Mutants run and was in a band with Dazzler. Dazzler is in her band. She can teleport intergalactically. Gateway, of course, who we know from the Outback era. Vanisher, who's from the original Silver Age X-Men, but was famously more modernly brought back by Kyle and Yost in their 2008 X-Force run. And Amelia Vogt, who has some wonderful ties to Xavier's history and famously during the, I want to say, Caesar or Lobdell with JR run in the early 300s, we get a wonderful flashback to how she's actually known Xavier even before the X-Men. So this is 6 characters with an amazing amount of X-Men history, literally crossing through like every decade of X-Men that you can cross through.
And isn't she at one time part of Magneto's acolytes as well?
Oh yeah.
So there are 3 acolytes.
Supporter.
So there are 3 acolytes on the space station right now.
Right. Vogt, Frenzy, and Fabian Cortez. Yeah.
I was wondering what quintitian means because I've never encountered that word before.
Right, because he's not a quantitian, which quantity like
quantile.
Math. Right, but quintitian.
Do you remember in our X Factor issue where, Peter, you mentioned sometimes the word's capitalized and you just assume it's something and you go with it? That was me. I was like, all right, he's a science guy. We're going to, I don't know. I guess that's probably something beyond my pay grade, but yeah.
So, I did a Google about it, and it seems like it is related to the word quantile, which is, a quantile in statistical definition means that it is an equal fifth of a distribution that has been divided into 5 parts. So that'll be one. And then another definition would be it is 1/5 of a circle. So I'm not sure why he's named that way here, because I think as we see later, I think he's more of a lifeline here than a statistical kind of play, given his role later on.
Yeah, he's pretty integral to the entire mission. I don't want to give. I do read the solicits, and it does seem like they'll be giving him a full issue, either in 1 or 2. So I'm sure we're going to see a big focus I love that character because I did really like Secret Warriors and Avengers. So that was my favorite teleporter of the group because that's the one I relate. That's one I know the most. It was fun.
Well, also, if you with me here, or you in the listening and viewing audience haven't read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther, Manifold is a major character there, and he just did a huge space arc, which actually hasn't quite wrapped up because Marvel's holding on to the solicits, and Manifold plays a big role there, and so it's kind of interesting because you get a sense that clearly has wrapped up, if not only Storm but also Manifold is active in the next books.
I'm looking forward to reading that book when it's finished, but every month lists come out and I'm like, man, still going, still doing the space thing. All right, we're good. But yeah.
So now let's go to the one that to me was the most delicious, the medical and energy resources person, which has Fabian Cortez as the executive producer. Of course, he's got like the most
executive producer. Yeah, this guy's amazing. I have no idea who he is. But as soon as you see that guy on the page, you know his whole deal, like immediately. Like this guy sucks.
Slime.
He's
Slime ball.
He sucks the most of almost any X-Men character of all time. He not like in a, like he's a bad character, but like every single thing he has done on the page has been terrible.
My favorite. He has my favorite line of the issue where he calls Magneto Dreadlord. I'm just like, please go somewhere else. Like, can you just disappear for a bit, man?
Well, again, your reading assignment is X-Men 1991 1-3. Then we'll talk about that when we come back for Sword number 2 because
you'll stop shop.
He's being played off as a comedic character here, as a loser here, you know, in a way, because he's like, Magneto is like, I recognize the ponytail, but I can't place the name. When Magneto could remember every single character's name, and even one character that seldom appears, Peeper. Yeah. He's like, Peter, and that plays off so well.
Well, and also the connection to the whole Mura root of House of X and Powers of X too, that Cortez was the one who was manipulating Magneto when Magneto himself was feeling manipulated, having realized all the stuff that Mura did to him when he was a baby, and Cortez made that situation worse in every possible way, causing the conflict in Mutant Genesis and eventually causing fatal attractions, really, because of his manipulation of Magneto. Yeah. And if there's anything Magneto doesn't like, he does not like to be manipulated. Now, he's made his peace with Mura because they're part of this engine that's secretly driving all of X-Men, but like, does he really have to make his peace with Cortez? If anything, it's like there are other mutants that we could have sent up there. They could have sent, there's probably other healers they could have sent up, but send Cortez. And I also thought when we originally got the 5, I'm like, Cortez would work well in the 5 because he's kind of like a combo elixir hope. Maybe he's one of the backups to the 5, but you almost get the sense that Magneto's like, nope, get him as far away from here as, so he knows exactly who it is. And he's probably the one who assigned him to be here, even though he would never say that. That's my take.
I had no idea they had all this history. That's so much funnier that he gives him such the cold shoulder.
They know each other intimately well.
I know, exactly.
That's great.
Let's jump to Ambassador Extraordinary.
Oh, well, I love Frenzy. She debuted in the original run of X Factor as one of their early villains, but she was written incredibly well by Mike Carey in the back half of his run on X-Men Legacy. She's great because she's a strong character who's been on both sides of the fence. She doesn't have an ideology. She wants to be on the team that wins, but she's never quite sure of who she is because she doesn't have her own ideology. So she's been an Acolyte. She's been an X-Man. She's been every possible thing in between. And so now we see her in space as an ambassador, which is funny because she's usually known as the person who just hits stuff really hard. And so just the comedy of her being an ambassador, but also like, why wouldn't she be an ambassador? She's been everything. She's played every side of this mutant game. Why would you not choose her as an ambassador?
That was the thing that sort of threw me off. I was like, wait, why is she an ambassador? I mean, like, she's a fighter, right? Like,
not really known for her way with words, generally. Not that she's not intelligent, just that she will punch you before she has her way with words. Yeah,
she's introduced punching someone.
Yes, appropriately.
And I thought this kind of plays really well because Brand is sort of like her in the sense that she plays a lot more politics than Frenzy. But she's also like quick to to react to certain things from the short amount of time that I know Brand. So I could be totally off base here.
No,
But
I'm with you. Yeah.
yeah, so I thought that, like, she would, like, yeah, I'm going to choose someone who's going to, like, punch someone in the face first before they sit down and, like, go through all the terms and conditions, and then negotiate over a glass of wine or dinner. And I mean, it is a perfect pick for Brand. I'm not sure if it's a perfect pick if this is going to be, if the S.W.O.R.D station is going to be a diplomacy station.
Well, I didn't.
Oh, go ahead, Harry.
I didn't know the character at all, but I just found her interesting on just like the broader level of being someone who used to be associated with Magneto and just being like, yeah, I've kind of moved on from this whole thing. Just kind of showing that S.W.O.R.D in general is kind of just evolving past what these old conflicts and ideas are. That was my read.
Also, another great redesign here by Schiti. Her just like that. She's always had the kind of dreads or twists with like the high shaved sides, but I think it's even done better here than it has in the past with that terrific jacket. It's just great.
Yeah.
So
and they have their own like danger room here.
The stranger room.
Yeah, I know.
I want to see more of that.
So we have an ambassador in training in armor, which to me actually made a lot of sense because it kind of gets her out of always leading the junior leagues and the X-Men. Like, get her out of there. Let them use other characters and always going back to armor.
Yeah.
But armor, let's not forget, like her whole first sequence of adventures was in Whedon's X-Men, which had her and Brand together interacting with all the stuff on what is that world? That world they went to. Break World.
Break World. That's right.
So that worked for me. But then, of course, we get the visiting galactic ambassador Payback, which gets us the scene about the Scarlet Witch. So here come the Empire spoilers. So technically, in Young Avengers, there are these two kids that aren't related by blood but seem connected, and they eventually turn out via Children's Crusade to be the reincarnated spirits of the children that Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, may or may not have imagined, but definitely made real. And so even though they are not genetically their children, they are spiritually her children. One of the two is Billy Kaplan. Billy Kaplan is a young gay character. He falls in love in that Young Avengers run with Teddy Hulkling, who is part Kree and part Skrull. And they eventually fall in love. They become one of Marvel's marquee gay couples. And in Empire this year, Hulkling, Teddy takes over the combined rule of the Kree Skrull Empire, and they get married in the finale. And so now Billy is the first gentleman of the Empire, but he's also Scarlet Witch's son, and this is Payback is a representative of that empire, which gives Magneto, as you can imagine, and Billy sometimes is identified as a mutant, sometimes not, and so you can imagine that this creates an extremely complex situation for Magneto here, and that is all hinted at by Ewing in the span of like 3 word balloons.
And a few facial expressions, if that.
She really gets it right.
And it's one of those things they never really do is explore the weird dynamics between Magneto and his fake, maybe real daughter and his fake, maybe real grandchildren.
Yeah.
And like, I just love the Young Avengers in general. I love Billy and Teddy just because they're like some of the first comics I read. And just the fact that they're kind of bringing their significance into the X world. It's just an interesting kind of development. I really hope we see more of it.
All right, I'm going to turn the next one over to Tyler. Cable, the security director.
Yeah, and his other function is being blacked out. So I was thinking, what could that be? Like initially, I was like, oh, he's a pilot, because in one of the tarot cards, he says that the holder of the sword is also the pirate of something else. So, but then it is a pretty long word. So I ended up thinking that it's reconnaissance, which kind of makes sense if you see, with him and with Random involved. I don't really know Risk that well, so I'm not sure if, she'll be well suited to do recon work. But with Random and his ability to adapt to different situations, he can just change stuff randomly. That's why he's random. And so I thought that could be another function of that team.
And also it's kind of like, part of me is like, Cable, like why Cable? He's just this kid to be the security director. But on the other side, like he kind of is responsible for clearing the station, which Brand acknowledges in her data page. So he was always going to get used. And it kind of comes down to what is after that slash that makes him, it's like, just like how Frenzy is diplomacy and negotiation. We all know how Frenzy is going to negotiate. So Cable is security and blank. And I think whatever blank is probably the reason he's security.
Yeah.
I don't want to come out swinging here, but if Ewing makes Cable interesting, that'll be his finest work yet. So I hope it's something fun. I don't know why he's in this book either.
Yeah, I mean, in his own book, he is given a really young
he's kind of like teen heartthrob Cable.
Yeah. So, and I kind of enjoyed it.
Cable.
Yeah.
Tiger beat Cable. Sorry.
So I don't know. I think it's fun, but I'm not sure how major of a role he plays here.
It's interesting, even from his own book that just came out. Like, just being in this position, he does seem slightly older or more mature. It definitely seems like something of like a development for him. Yeah, I wonder how it plays out in the Cable book. I say half-heartedly, but we'll see.
Wow. I'm not the only one who doesn't like things. So I will say that that Risk here is the one that stumped me. I had to actually fire up Ye Olde Internet and figure out where Risk was from. She debuted in X-Force number 51, so before the road trip era of X-Force. She's another character who's made a very small amount of prior appearances. Here she is in S.W.O.R.D. Tyler, why don't you wrap us up on this final one? We have the observation and analysis group, and we don't get to learn who the main psychic analyst is, although we do know who their observer is. What do you have to say about that?
The psionic analyst really stumped me. And initially I was like, oh, who is a telepath and could be used here? Well, Jean basically just quits the council. So she's the first person who is a Phoenix. So, she could be...
She's got some space cred.
Yeah. So she could be a good fit here. But then there is this throwaway line later on that Peeper basically says, what did he say? He says something like, I'm working with Omav in the psionic team and analyst team when I'm not doing this here. And then I figure out that it could actually be Mantello, because Mantello's real name is Marvin Flum.
Wow, that is a deep cut, Tyler.
That was a really deep cut.
Yeah, man, that was...
Yeah. And he's a low-level telepath. And, he's also one of the villains that appeared in House of X 5.
In that big splash.
Xavier's call, and everyone, all the villains just basically stepped through the gate. So, I thought that was, I mean, if I'm right, that is a really, really deep cut.
Well, and both of them have a history with Magneto, and it plays out hilariously on the page with Peepers. In the middle of brushing off Fabian Cortez, Magneto seems to have a deep knowledge of Peepers' every Marvel comic appearance here.
He's like, you are my best friend. It's so great to see you, Peeper. But I like it.
Let's have a drink later.
I don't know if this was me reading into it too much, but considering I didn't know these two characters' backgrounds of Fabian Cortez and Peeper, I found it interesting that Magneto is just so much more relaxed with this down-to-earth character like Peeper than this kind of very fancy, like upper crust thing that Fabian Cortez is doing. And it felt more of like, Magneto being that kind of folk figure and more down-to-earth thing that we've been seeing of late. That's how it felt, on the surface.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's I was just laughing it off because it was playing off Fabian being ignored, and basically Fabian is saying the same thing as people, but people actually got the attention of Magneto because he's like, oh, I have some suggestion for the council, and it's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll listen to it. And then when Fabian said the same thing, he's just got brushed aside.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Well, we have made it through this massive arrangement of characters, but the upshot is that the reason we're introduced to the 6 of them, and some of them not necessarily the head of their departments, which Peepers is not, but he is part of the 6, is because the 6 form this operational unit that, by virtue of being anchored and also transported by the telepaths, keep saying telepaths, the teleporters, teleporters can retrieve things of interest. And so we get this final sequence, which is a very different kind of comic sequence, because it feels very Silver Agey, because it's just this huge psychedelic art with words like right over top of it, and you don't know who's speaking them or who's captioning, because we see the machine of the 6 get fired up to get something What do we think about
something.
this?
Well, and just in case you're wondering why there is this sword symbol besides the characters, they are just the six. Basically,
Right, because some
the
of them
sword
are not
symbols
their
on the
department
six.
or heads, but they are still the six. Right.
Yeah.
So that felt the most to me like the most like familiar Al Ewing that we've had in the book, where like when those big splash pages came where they're just falling through the white space and all this metaphysical stuff, I was like, oh, there it is. There's the stuff I was expecting from this writer. It's definitely a shift from the first 2/3 of the issue, which is literally just a tour of a space station.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I liked it more than I definitely think you did, Peter. But like it definitely is less engaging for me than the other stuff. But it looks pretty. It's well drawn.
Well, I mean, before we talk even more about this, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the art here.
Yeah.
I mean, the redesign of the station, I thought it was like pretty amazing.
It is, with all the flowers and greenery and the red and I mean, it's stunning. That first page of the station is stunning.
I mean,
yeah, and it reminds you of the old station, and yet it tells you that it's no longer the same, exactly the same. It's different. It's a little bit different now.
I think a lot of this book's success is because of Schiti, because, you know, you have these humongous sci-fi things and so much cast. And it's really the first 2/3 of the issue is literally just people walking through a space station.
It's just a Sorkin. It's just a walking.
But it is. But the level of expression and warmth and emotion on each face, which I think Schiti does so well in every book he does, like that is what makes it so like entertaining and fun. And you don't feel like, I mean, I didn't notice a lack of action or kind of bombast in the issue until we got to the huge fireworks later. But like I really hope he stays on the book. I think he's integral.
Well, and it's interesting because Schiti, I really liked him at the top of Marvel Now when he was on Journey into Mystery with Catherine Immonen doing the Sif stuff. And I liked him because his style was very kind of semiotic. Like people almost looked like the little like computer game, like 8-bit icons of themselves. It was very plain, had a strong stroke around it. And I feel like over the intervening 8 years now, he's fantastic, but he's moved much more into Marvel House style, which tends to be very Catherine's partner, Stuart Immonen's derived. It's very Immonen derived. Characters are glossy, they pop, and it feels like now we're getting a certain number of people who were in that house style who are starting to be allowed to grow out of it. And I use Pepe Larraz always as my example because I think he was the Immonen imitator number one until he was let off his chain, and now he's like one of my favorite in comics. And Schiti I've had this frustration with because I feel like when is he gonna push out of this Immonen Marvel House style mold, which is nothing against Immonen or Marvel House style, but it didn't feel uniquely Schiti. And this issue to me finally feels like, especially looking at some of the faces, especially looking at some of the design, that he's kind of cracking through and moving into a style that feels a little bit more unique than the style we've seen from him the past couple of years.
That's a good observation. I'm also very biased to him because like he's just like I think he's an artist that's kind of dragged some books with middling art into better quality, like Hickman's Avengers. I think his I love those books a lot, but I think the stuff with Schiti with the New Avengers arc is like the best that book ever reaches, and a lot of that falls on him. But you're right that he has been aping. I'm not aping, but definitely more.
No, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that either. It's very Marvel House style. It's just a book that looks like a Marvel book. DC does that too. They have a certain number of artists that they can rotate through in the same series, and you can't even tell which of them it is because they're just in DC House style. And Marvel's got like 5 or 6 of them, and he's just one of them. And this feels to me like you could not rotate one of those other artists in the next issue and convince me it was the same artist. I would be like, where's my Valerio Schiti art? Well, we've come to the end of this issue. What are our final remarks on S.W.O.R.D number 1? Clearly, you two are looking forward to a little bit more than me, but is there anything you wanted to talk about that we have not covered yet?
Well, I mean, I think Ewing just expanded on the concept of a mutant circuit or a machine, and that plays I think it plays into Hickman's planetary chart there, where you have like a single, and then you have like a hive, and then and it goes all the way up to dominions. So I feel like this is building on it, and in some ways, the whole last 1/3 of it is Ewing just playing around with stuff that he has created before, because he did a lot of all these different space, the the pyramid that they first make a pit stop at the far shore. The far shore is a concept that was introduced by Ewing in Avengers, in No Surrender, where I think where he co-wrote with Zub Wells.
Yeah.
and
No,
and,
Zub, Jim Zub, not Zub.
Oh,
Wells.
Jim Zub.
All-
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim
Zub
Zub.
Wells.
Jim
Zub.
Zub and Mark Waid. And it is described as the furthest point of life and death, and beyond there's only mystery. So now the mutants machine has gone beyond, and they retrieve this pyramid thing, which was also introduced in Avengers No Surrender, like kind of a pimeroid or something that they call it. And at that time, it was more like elementals, but this one is just one with no symbols on it. And it could be, a combination of all the elementals into one, or it could be something else. I don't know. But it is kind of interesting in that aspect.
Well,
That's
Ewing does that with a few. Sorry about that, Harry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Ewing does that with a few different concepts here. He mentions the Snark War, which he teased originally in his Inhumans run. You almost get the sense back in how like Peter David did back in the day in his Hulk run, where he was seeding things all the time, and he was like, "Look, either I get to pay him off now, or I get to pay him off later." But they're concepts I want to do. They weren't concepts he had to write as Hulk concepts. And one of them, the War in Hell, he wound up resolving in X Factor, years, almost 2 decades later. And so you get the sense that Ewing is kind of that kind of writer. He's just constantly throwing out stuff. Maybe Snark War is going to play a big role here. Maybe it's not. Maybe the pyramids are. Maybe they're not. But this is just part of this like huge fabric of Ewing space stuff. And keep in mind, he's also writing Guardians of the Galaxy right now.
Yeah.
That he is just weaving with, and he wrote Empire, that he is weaving with such confidence.
That was my question coming out of this book, is that, is this book now the flagship for his cosmic work? Because between Empire and Guardians, he's been making big changes in that world, and S.W.O.R.D feels like another. Is this going to be more in the X line? Is this going to be kind of like the figurehead for more space stuff? Is it going to be both? Like that I think is going to be the most interesting to watch as this unfolds. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the King in Black next issue.
Oh,
I mean,
boy.
I think in a lot of ways, the X-Men, even when they are doing their space stuff, is always not always. In recent years, it's not, but for a very long time, it's kind of like sequestered in their own corner of the space. It's always the Shi'ar, it is always the Brood, and and they don't really do a lot with the Kree and the Skrulls, which are more the Avengers aliens, so to speak. So, I mean, I feel like, given that this is under the umbrella of Rocks and Head of X, so I think that this is going to be more focused on the mutant side of things, with threats that he brings in from his other work more than anything.
I mean, maybe, but so much of this issue is about like moving beyond thinking in terms of nations like Krakoa. Like what's in the book is saying, we want to focus on bigger threats. So it feels, and just the way the Magneto is like, I was wrong, you were right at the end of the issue. It feels like it's moving away from that to me. So it feels like a giant question mark.
No, but this is exactly what is happening in Hotspots, right? In Moira's life, Life 6, she went beyond the mutants. She go all the way to the end, the blue post-human people, right? And she learned of certain things there, and how that affects her plan, we do not know. And I feel like this is like basically Hickman is like, okay, I'm going to do something. This is my endpoint. How we get to that endpoint, I leave it up to you. You can get us there or push us in the direction, so that when I come to my last act, or the act that deals with this, I can use those stuff that you created. I feel like that is what is happening here?
Well, that is the question I think that we're going to leave us on here, because this has been quite an extended discussion of S.W.O.R.D number 2. If you want to hear our discussion of the other issues of this week, which had its own kind of personality conflicts in it, you also need to look for the This Week in X episode about Marauders number 16. But with that, we're going to call it a day on S.W.O.R.D number 1. We'll be back with more This Week in X. So thank you so much for watching. On behalf of Tyler, Harry, myself, and our lost sister, Fariha, X-Men is better when we read it together. So thank you for reading it along with us. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.